This is Bring It In, True Hoop Show that happens at 11 a.m. weekdays. Today, Ben Aronson, he's the managing partner and group director of global strategy at MediaCom. There's nobody better to talk the business of the NBA with. He's got this giant brain, knows all kinds of stuff. We lost the first couple of minutes of this episode, but I'm going to tell you what you need to know, which is he's in a park with his son, Duke, and his son is named Duke. He had told a story about it that includes being a very young underage drinker, like 10, and drinking some Mickeys, which he says was a mistake, and in his inebriated state watched a Duke basketball game, and that's part of the reason his son's named Duke today. Just go with it. We are about to talk about a lot of business stuff. I think you'll understand the rest of the context from this point.
If there was ever a time to innovate,
Right.
It is now.
Right.
But we need to innovate from what I didn't like was the context that like ratings are falling and basketball is awful and therefore we need to cut to 30 games. We need to contextualize it accurately based on what the ratings have been over a 10-year period and not just looking at 3 years and saying that like it's catastrophic that we're down. But I do think right now is the most optimal time to innovate if there ever was.
Okay, before we get into how we should innovate, which I'm excited to do, I was just thinking about this. Okay, so the NBA primarily pays its bills now with giant checks from ESPN and Turner.
Yep.
ESPN and Turner pay their bills from monthly cable fees and advertising revenue, right? Monthly cable fees have been like just a crisis for quite some time before the pandemic. I imagine that's only going to get worse. I saw at some point, I think DirecTV lost 1 million customers in 1 month.
Wow.
Now, you know a tremendous amount about all of this, but also this other part, this advertising, like that I assume is also going to be incredibly choppy waters for quite some time, right?
Yeah, so the advertising is, so let's talk pre-COVID, not post-COVID, right?
Okay.
Advertising has been a problem because ratings, the way they sell advertising is they sell it based on an expected viewership, right? So they say this game is going to get 1 million viewers, so it's going to cost you a CPM rate, like an average cost per million or a cost per GRP point, which are all media terms. But basically, they sell it to you expecting to get 1 million eyeballs. If the game only gets 900,000, normally what happens is you get givebacks. So ESPN then has to find you another 100,000 eyeballs somewhere else, right? Yeah. That's typically how it works. Now they're not obligated to, but they typically do that because they also don't you don't pay more when a show overrates, right? So like if a game does over well, but so that there has been this decline and the advertising revenue has taken a hit, or the advertising impact has taken a hit. Therefore the revenue goes down, but live sports still has cachet, and the NBA itself still has a ton of cultural impact. The actual, if you follow the Google Trends data about how much people search, you'll actually see that the distance between the NBA and NFL is disproportionately closer than the distance between the ratings are, which is like 17-1 in terms of ratings, but it's only about 2-1 in terms of search interest. Right. Additionally,
wait. I'm only in at a 6th grade level of what you just said. Like, can you just say that to me again? That sounds super interesting. I want to understand it.
Yeah. So basically, the ratings for NBA, the average NBA game, are, if I remember off the top of my head correctly, it's like a somewhere between an average of a 7 on broadcast games, like ABC games, 7-1. NFL is bigger in audience than NBA. When it comes to local games, non-broadcast or cable, it's like a 17-1 difference in terms of audience size. But in terms of search interest, so how many times people are just Googling NBA subjects, NFL is only roughly 2 times bigger in audience than NBA, right? Which is where you start to get why the NBA still maintains such value. The moment somebody wants to sell a product, they go to NBA first, right? And it's because of this cultural impact.
So, okay, Ben, now my head's on fire. Because here's the deal. Like, from my selfish point of view as someone who was a digital executive at ESPN, like the success is digital, right? The interest is digital, but the business model is linear.
So yes and no. The interest, if we're really honest, is not the games. The
Right.
interest actually are the highlights, the fashion, the stories, and the games are a necessity to get to that stuff,
Yeah.
right? But it's kind of, and I don't want to fully tie this the same way, but it's kind of like TV and entertainment culture is actually now more about the TMZ than it is about the show when you look at the ratings, right? And what I mean by that is like, the average sitcom on ABC is doing like 1/10 the audience that it did 10 years ago, right? I mean, it's way down, maybe 20 years, right? But what is bigger than ever is the interest and everything surrounding it. So if that same sitcom star whose show only does 700,000 viewers, if that sitcom star says something outlandish or does something crazy or shows up somewhere, that story about them could get 3, 4, 5 million hits, which is just crazy to say that like only 700,000 people care about what they do to make them famous, but millions of people care about what they do to potentially not be famous anymore or what they do with their fame off the field or off the show.
Absolutely. So that's the nature of digital traffic, right? But I guess as all of this interest surrounds the NBA and this digital traffic, which parts of it are monetizable to the league as products, right? The game certainly is, but that's not a good enough answer because, young people aren't going to watch the game.
Well, if I were the league, and this is actually something that I believe should happen in sports media as well, I would start making as part of the contracts social media tie-ins, right? And kind of do more what the music industry does, which is closer to like 360 deals. Now the players won't like that, right? But it's the opportunity to create much greater revenue opportunities from a centralized organization, which by the way, is actually what's better for everybody involved in terms of income, right? Because the NBA can negotiate with greater power than a whole bunch of individual athletes because you can play them off against each other. It's the same reason why in labor negotiations, the owners typically win. It's way easier to get 30 people to agree to similar interests than it is to get 300 people to agree. But the challenge is TV is still worth way more. An eyeball on TV is worth significantly more. You pay as an advertiser significantly more. And statistically, we actually see the mental brain impact of an ad is more impactful on TV than it is on social or digital. So until the advertising has the impact on these other channels, it doesn't matter that that's where the interest is. There's still enough people watching linear TV or the connected streaming version of linear TV, which is still the game product, that's where the money is, and that's where the NBA is going to kind of focus its energy.
I mean, I'm not going to argue, but I feel like that's so short-sighted if that's their
No.
strategy, right?
I'm not saying that that's what they, like I said, what I think they should be doing is figuring out how do you start owning the social media better? How do you start making more value out of that product? I'm just saying in the short term, brands still pay. And I would say this is probably going to be true for at least another 5 to 7 years. I mean, you pay to reach 1,000 people on social, 1/8 of what you pay to reach them on TV. And that's based on the idea of the impact that TV provides versus the impact that social provides, right? But that's an 8x difference in revenue for the same eyeball.
Right. That's definitely the structure of it. And I don't think you and I disagree on this, but the net effect of that is like 7 years ago, John Skipper has billions of dollars to spend on product, right? Because he runs a TV organization. Meanwhile, at that moment, if you'd put those billions into digital products, we wouldn't be fumbling around to try to figure out what is the digital product NBA can monetize. We would have it.
Well, so I totally agree. And that's why I'm saying I was just talking about where we're at today.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally
things
get
are
that.
today.
Yep.
If we start talking about where we want to innovate, which we talked about doing later, I completely agree that there's going to be so much more interesting stuff coming in the near future, right? So I was just over at Turner's Innovation Lab, right, where they're doing all this stuff for media in general, but obviously NBA is a huge part because they have, the NBA rights. And they're very soon going to be doing all of this like real-time stat tracking, highlight like sports science stuff that can then get fed out to not just regular content, sports gambling. You're going to be able to bet on, as a shot is about to get taken, is it going to go in? Like, we are talking like super real-time stuff. Odds are going to flash up, everything. There's so much interesting digital innovation to come, but it's all leaning into the idea that the NBA and eventually all sports is driven by the clippable moment. What is that 5-second to 2-minute thing that draws me in? Because that's really the way the younger audiences under 35 are consuming the sport, which is another weird, misleading thing, is the NBA does skew younger than other sports, but those people tend to be watching the highlights or consuming the culture, not necessarily watching the games.
So if you were the media czar for the NBA, what would you do? If you were in charge of trying to create revenue streams from all that you just talked about, what would you do, Ben?
The first and foremost thing that I would do is, in this next collective bargaining agreement, I would take some form of ownership of player social media, right? So that we could sell that as part of packages. So for instance, right now, when I work with ESPN on a big TV deal, right, to buy the NBA for one of my brands, part of what we get are all these shoulder programs, digital social media extensions, all this stuff. But ESPN is a huge social presence, and then they have access to their talent. But the NBA, right, they only really have use of their own NBA channels. And so if all of a sudden, when I buy the NBA deal, I could get LeBron James as a partnership marketing deal to help tweet about that, that is a huge advantage. Now, there are some things that the NBA does like that, some things the NFL for like very, very big high-end deals. But if you could get that going on a more regular basis, I mean, you could get, I would say, honestly, a 50 to 70% increase in revenues.
Is that how you sell it to the players?
Duke situation. Hold on. Duke situation.
Are we good? We're good.
What's up, buddy?
So is that how you'd sell it to the players, Ben? Is you would tell them you'll make more money if you let us help with this?
Well, yeah, because if the collective bargaining agreement is still a base split of revenues, right? Everyone benefits from the ability to negotiate in bulk. Now, the few people who'd be against this, a LeBron James,
right, the superstars,
you know, a Zion Williamson, superstars,
right.
But at the end of the day, even they would get more financial opportunities. And it doesn't mean that they have to say yes to everything, but it just means that like each player can negotiate in, you know, a certain amount of social posts for brands upon approval, et cetera, et cetera. But all of a sudden your contracts would go up tremendously as well, because the league revenue would go up. So that to me would be point one. And point two would be figuring out a better way to the digital products, and the digital shoulder content is just not good enough yet. Totally. It just isn't. The sidecast, which I fortunately got to, you know, be a part of the inspirational conversations with Jade and in the development of that is the next wave. To me, Twitter is a place where we watch content together, and the easiest win is to take a concept like the sidecast, have it live in Twitter, and be a co-viewing platform, so I can actually watch the game alongside Amin Al Hassan or Ethan Strauss or Coach Thorpe, right? And get different expert feeds. I believe it's Nate Duncan kind of does that already, but again, the quality of it isn't there from a production standpoint.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be like megacast, sidecast level production, but I do think it needs to be a little bit better than what that is. But Duncan's right on with what he's doing.
I don't, to be honest, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't see 13-year-olds spending 3 hours in front of a show with commercials ever. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I could be wrong, but I feel like the sidecast is a digital improvement to habits you and I have. But to me, there's going to have to be a whole different product that we haven't imagined yet. Maybe born of House of Highlights, maybe a time-shifted broadcast, maybe something that we've never even considered, maybe some video game integration. But to me, like, that's a guess. I think we'll need 1,000 guesses before we have like something that will approach the revenue replacement of what we're going to lose from what's happening right now.
So I don't disagree with that, right? But I do think what you're talking about is they were never worried about 13-year-old ratings, right? So we don't really care about people's ratings and their viewership habits till they become, 18, 19.
Oh,
Now,
yeah,
on
I'm
the
just
other
trying to
hand,
predict 5 years out, right? That's all. It's just my guess.
I would say what you're predicting is actually more like 10 years out.
Okay.
But I do think you're right. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we have any idea what the next level of viewing habits are going to be. I do think it is far more going to be about the content around the game, though, than the game itself. I don't know if there will eventually be like games within the game, like Dunk of the Night, that is actually something that like is something you bet on or something you like are rating and voting in real time somehow while watching. So I'm totally in on that. But most of the innovation that I'd like to see are stuff that we could do actually within the next 5 years. Like there's such obvious stuff and something, to move on to the post-COVID world. I am fearful that ratings are going to see a strike-like impact post-COVID. So if you guys are familiar with like baseball and hockey post-strike, it took years, and if not for the steroid home run derby of baseball, they may not ever have fully recovered like the NHL. And I think what happens is with these sports with tons of games is people all of a sudden discover something else to do in that hour of the day that they used to watch. And you're like, oh, like, wow, without basketball, I'm going to sleep at a normal time. Or without basketball, I don't actually need cable at all. So maybe I can just cut this and just go to Hulu, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that I'm really worried about that post-COVID. Like, what does basketball look like?
Henry said that to me, God, maybe exactly a month ago, this exact line of, and he wasn't talking about just the NBA. He was saying just TV entertainment in general. People are going to find other things that they enjoy. And like he was talking about Jimmy Fallon, who's this brilliant entertainer, but he doesn't need this gigantic studio show if no one really cares because we've lived just fine without it. That was his point, a month ago. Right, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did you see the Katie Nolan brilliance of the Zoom show? Do you know what I'm talking about, Ben?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so like this is a really good digital product that in an era where we're just little babies trying to figure out how to make a good digital product, right? I actually like the product where it's like, hey, take Duke to the park and walk around and talk like that. I think that's good. But people will get way, way better at this, right? We are total babies at this right now. And, having Lin-Manuel Miranda and Dwayne Wade join a Zoom chat was delightful. It was like totally heartwarming. So that, knowing ESPN, that would have never been permissible a month ago, right?
Well, so I'll give you a little inside info here, right?
Yeah.
Prim came up with the idea to take her show, The Next Chapter, which is all about athletes, struggles and successes off the court, right?
Yeah.
But to take that to a daily video show during COVID, right? And so I actually took the idea as part of a potential brand integration and pitched it to ESPN.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we'll put it on our YouTube. And we were going to put major brand dollars behind it. Like, we'll put it on our YouTube, but that's it. And The Athletic instead said, no. This is a Twitter show. This is a short, snackable Twitter show that is naturally shareable within this channel. So we're going to post it there. And so she launched it 10 days ago, and it's been doing great. We're all organic, averaging about 20,000 views per clip.
Yeah.
And it's about acknowledging you need to accept that you don't need these huge studios. One of the dumbest things ESPN did was invest all that money in the new SportsCenter studios, thinking that that's what was the audience problem. ESPN was just suffering from ratings decline. And every single time they make a change, they lose a bit of their audience, thinking that it's some technical thing, rather than just acknowledging like, hey, some of this decline is completely out of your control. right? Don't react rashly, but use some of these new channels and amazing talent you have access to in different ways beyond that. So you don't need to change Sports Center. Just add a new show with Katie Nolan, but then actually put it on, publicize it, give her freedom to put it out digitally the way she wants, right? Innovate, use these Zoom chats permanently. Why not?
But Ben, they don't like. I mean, it's a little bit of a different company than when I worked there, but they do not. The people that I know who made the big dollar decisions there had in there as soon as the answer was digital, those particular individuals became irrelevant. Their careers were effectively over. So as you watch cable trend down, their relevancy trended down. So this became the company that just didn't want the answer to be digital, which is exactly why this wouldn't have happened with Katie Nolan a month ago. You need a pandemic to get ESPN to put its leading talent on a digital first thing.
Well, listen, then the pandemic, I think, is really going to separate the weak from the strong in this environment, and the adaptable from the stubborn, because they say, like, if you read like Charles DeWitt and The Power of Habit or things like that, whether it's through forcing and writing a plan or just the amount of time you do something, right? Most of our behaviors are habit, right? They're system one, mindless. You get home from work, you just turn on the TV, you flip to CNN or ESPN. Like, you don't even think about these things. They're not active choices, and we all think they are. And so 30 days of quarantine is going to massively change our behaviors. And digital was the first place. We are seeing social media usage elevated, the amount of engagement elevated. TikTok has like quadrupled its user base. Hulu saw a 67% year over year increase in memberships. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you don't tend to go backwards. Now, there are some things that I don't think, like social media usage in the middle of the day when people have to go back to school or work, is not going to stay where it is.
Right.
But TikTok as a platform, I think, is here. Like, I think people are just here. Hulu as a platform. Disney Plus, now over 50 plus million subscribers in 6 months, something like that. I mean, this is here to stay.
Wait, actually, why isn't ESPN Plus part of Disney Plus? Do you know what the answer is?
It kind of is. It's that they did that package deal.
So if you get Disney Plus, you have ESPN?
You get Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus for $12.99. It's actually like a phenomenal deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam Silver pointed out, he was like they made this interesting decision not to include it with Disney Plus. And I was like, well, that's on Adam's mind. Wonder what's going on there.
Well, I think structurally the reason that they are 3 apps has to do with like the ownership deals about how they were created. ESPN Plus came first. Secondly, I also think it has to do with, at least in the short term, there's brand equity in ESPN, brand equity in Disney that aren't worth conjoining at the moment, officially from a branding perspective. Also, I think you would see a lot of people who are family oriented who might be like, well, I don't want my kids stumbling on all this like adult sports content, or vice versa. So I think that's the reason that structurally they're 3 apps. I'd say within 5 years, you'll probably find them under one heading.
Yeah.
Maybe 2.
Yeah. You, actually, Judy, do you mind showing Ben's tweet about the stadium research? People say they don't want to go to stadiums. There we go. Look at this. 72% of people won't feel comfortable attending a sporting event until there's a vaccine. And then you say sports are not going to look the same for some time, if ever. Talk to me about that.
So I don't know about you guys. Maybe this is an age thing. So I'm going to completely admit this. Maybe it's an age thing. I hate crowds of people. And I hate, the process of getting in and out of stadiums. And I get free tickets constantly from friends in the industry, friends in the league. And what I found is it's not a great experience when you compare it to everything else. We are now in a complete on-demand, how I want it, when I want it, expediency. And when you combine that with the fear of getting sick, these group environments at a massive level, and the cost associated with attending events, I think it is an easy thing to drop off the radar of things I want to do. It's a $500 night if you're taking 3 people to a basketball game, minimum. I mean, it's crazy expensive. And then one of the things that I do want to talk about shortening the season, like ticket prices don't stay the same. They have to just make the same amount of revenue with less games. Maybe it's not a 1-to-1 correlation, but ticket prices will go up, and basketball is already obscenely expensive, right? One of the things people don't realize when they talk about soccer in the UK, soccer is a working class sport. And you can go to a match. I saw Liverpool and Manchester United play, and retail value on the ticket and what I paid for it was £40, right? About $50 for good seats in the Kop, right? Which is like the fan section of Anfield. It's a working class sport. It's affordable within reason. It's affordable. Basketball and sports are just getting astronomical, right? And we pay for them, whether by choice, by buying tickets, or not by choice, by, taxpayer funded stadiums. And it's just ridiculous. And I think the pandemic and virus is going to be the short-term reason. But I think long-term, again, habits. I just think it becomes less important. And it becomes something that maybe you go, if you went 3 times a year, maybe you go once a year now. If you went once a year before, maybe you go once every 3 years. And it's just going to change unless you start seeing these stadiums, and they're starting to get there, become more experiences beyond the game, which they're starting to be that. But even then, that's like going to Disney World. You just don't do it often, even if you live in Orlando.
Well, David does actually.
But Ben is right. When you go to stadiums, even G League games, I've seen both in person and on TV. There's always a kids section, no matter where you go, and so those kids aren't watching the game; they're playing in the kids section. And what Ben said, how he finishes, but I was just thinking, if you are going to treat it like Disney World, you're not going to go a ton. But do you think, and this is Henry, you might know better, will owners recognize this and pivot to just a better ticket plan so they can get more people in their arena?
I tell you, we're going to deal with a lot less money, right?
Yeah.
So like,
sure.
they would have not chosen to accept something with a lot less money. Now they're just going to live it, right? Like that's just how it's going to be. And in that environment might inspire a different thought pattern, right? Now you can see what life is like with very little ticket revenue. And then you might accept, a new thing. I have, like, in the past, I'm forgetting who told me this, but some really smart person who works on this stuff firsthand was basically, you can predict how well a stadium is going to do revenue-wise based on how many Fortune 500 companies are headquartered nearby. So tickets are a part of it, but the big money's from in-arena signage and selling suites and these kind of things. And like in Memphis, I think FedEx is the only company. I think New Orleans maybe doesn't have any. So you just can't there isn't enough money around to make that stadium work. So whatever happens with ticket prices, you're already doomed, kind of thing. So I feel like what I'm saying is this sport, for whatever reason, is simply not what Ben's describing with European soccer, right?
Right.
It's just not for people, regular people. I have this, I'm sorry, monologue so much, but when they redid the Sixers stadium, they created this thing where to get to the $10 seats, which I proudly did, is the longest escalator in the history of the world. And it goes right past the all-you-can-eat buffet on the club level, where there's like chefs in uniforms and the big hat serving like the carvery beef. And the whole point is like, sucker, like you should have paid way more, right? Like, I didn't feel good. I didn't feel like they wanted me there. I felt like a piece of crap going to those seats, right? Whereas I think at the soccer game, or even at a Jets game, you feel like the king of the world, even in the cheap seats, because everybody's in the same boat.
100%. And it used to be that the diehard fans were in the bleachers at Yankee Stadium, or were in the 300 level of Giant Stadium. And those people aren't just getting priced out, but they're getting made to feel less than, right? And that's another thing that I think you're 100% right, that the real money is in the corporate sponsorships, but there's a PR wave that also impacts people's desire to do those corporate sponsorships. So if the whole narrative is the fan is priced out, Well, then even as a rich person, you start to feel like, I don't necessarily know if I want to be part of the reason regular people can't go. Rich people only like being that way when they can delude themselves into thinking that they're not part of the problem, right? It's true. The moment
Tweet
it's
that, Henry.
inactive,
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Hey,
right? Like
hey,
look at fur. Look at Canada Goose. Those things don't start getting impacted till it becomes such a public narrative that people are like, well, I don't really care about animals, but I can't be seen to be doing this.
What kind of jacket are you wearing?
Adidas fake down polymer, whatever.
it's good to be reminded of the energy level of a 1.5-year-old. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
My soon-to-be 19-year-olds would not move 1 inch in that kind of. Yeah, they wouldn't. It wouldn't be outside in the first place in that weather. Ben, so having a million teenage boys in my house all the time who love, they're all playing high school basketball. They love it. They love the NBA. They love the NBA 2K. But they can't watch a game and not look at their phones all the time.
That's
just like anything else. Movies, unless they're in a theater, they're always going to use that screen. Is that where, when you talk about the digital side of things, whether it's sidecasts or whatever, there's got to be ways to constantly engage with them on their phones while they're watching the game, if it either even are, whether in the arena or not.
Well, that's exactly the point about things like sidecasts and Twitter and acknowledging where people are. But realize that's not an NBA problem. That's NFL.
It's everything.
That's everything. That's
right.
everything. And also, that's not a young people problem.
That's
Look at all of us, right?
That's right.
Henry's no stranger to being on Twitter while a game's going on.
Right.
You know?
What?
Right.
But I want to hear from you guys, right? What do you think the future is? Because just because I work in media, you guys are really smart. And Henry, we did have a great lunch because you bring up great challenging ways of thinking. It's just I was approaching it back then and still kind of do about well, where's the money really going to come from? Because that's what drives this.
I feel like House of Highlights has an approach to the game that resonates with young people, but it probably could be done with, they're literally just chopping up the game into a short version of the game. What if it was shot for the purposes of appealing on House of Highlights, right? So we need the low angle slow-mo footage. We need to really, when Steph wins a game from 38 feet in Oklahoma City, we need the phantom camera, every angle. We need the percentages, the likelihood of it going in, all of that just in stunning, gorgeous. We need Steph, the audio of him saying, I don't know, man, sometimes you just got to kick ass, right? Whatever he's going to say. And I think we need that at 8 minutes after it happens, and it's probably doable. But I think that you might get a kid to endure a short ad for that.
I think that's brilliant, and I think that's what I was kind of alluding to with the Turner Innovation Lab, is that type of stuff. What they need is more of what they get with video games, right?
Yeah.
What you get with video game is as you score a goal, you get 17 angles of it. You can rewind it. You can show it to your friends. All of it is shareable instantaneously. And by the way, that's all doable with technology literally this second.
Right.
They just don't make access to anything in real time because everybody is scared shitless of the mic being on. Think about what we actually get when we mic somebody up in sports. Yeah. Come on, guys. Lots of hustle. Great job. Come on. Give me more. It's like everybody talks like Russell Wilson. Where's the realness? I was a college wrestler, and I was like, I know what these athletes are saying, and that's not it. You know what they're saying. We've all sat courtside, and you're like, bro, if you heard the things that they say loud, not whispering, while dude's taking a foul shot, it's way worse than that whole Kevin Garnett, Carmelo Anthony thing.
I used to have this, I think maybe Jade and I talked about this, but we're if you gave at All-Star Weekend every player $50,000 cash, and then just were go mic'd up in the arena, gamble each other with basketball-derived games, horse or whatever, they're amazing. It'll be amazing. It'll be absolutely amazing, and there will be cursing, and it will be the most popular thing that happens all year.
Didn't Larry Bird didn't he do that to Xavier
basically.
McDaniel or something like that?
Yeah.
Where he was like, I'm going to hit it from right here.
Yeah.
And then he did.
Yeah.
There's something else too. I've learned this from Henry. The value of storytelling in when the hero is going through a crisis, which is every movie, every TV show we've ever watched and enjoyed. Well, not every game has a great story, but many of them do. It's never captured on SportsCenter except for the game-winning shot. But there's things that happen to create that crisis to begin with that unless there was a dunk or a block shot involved, no one saw it. There's a better way to tell that story. And the other thing too is, if and this is something we want to do with True Hoop, if we get players and coaches and executives to really speak the truth, to what you were saying, Ben, unfiltered, right? The raw truth of what they're going through. There's an appreciation that every man can have for these athletes. And when we appreciate them more, and then we know their story, and then we see them in crisis or conflict, whatever the resolution is, it's a dramatic thing and suspenseful thing to watch. And you can do that in an 8-minute video after the game too. House of Highlights could be really telling that story instead of just the dunks and the threes.
There are players like I know a real story about a real NBA player who had just the most dreadful, like someone very close to him was a victim of sexual assault, and it basically ruined his career. He was very involved in trying to care for the victim, and he fell off the map. Nobody knows that, right? But like meanwhile, like the sports radio take on that guy was he just doesn't want it bad enough, or he's not in good enough shape, right? That's a really stupid version of the story, right? Like, I don't know if we could earn his trust, have him tell that story, but if we could, that's the part that becomes movie, right?
Yeah. Okay. Ben might be on mute now.
Ben, are you muted?
Yes.
I think Ben's muted. Let's see if we can get him back.
There we go.
There he is. There we go.
I was muted by the host.
That's sorry.
No worries.
We just wanted to talk for a while, Ben. That's all.
No, I've been talking way too much. But I agree. I totally agree with what you're getting at. Like, I think the human interest side is something that's really important that needs to be told. I think that there are voices of announcers and kind of analysts that there should be no, the NBA could have like 7 broadcasts of every episode for barely more money with different types of people giving the commentary. And that's what I was getting at with the sidecast. Additionally, I think a mic'd up version, people who think that because LeBron and D Wade are friends, that they didn't want to give each other buckets,
right,
is like crazy. Do we not all remember growing up
of course,
and playing super angrily, almost fighting each other, and then going over to each other's house to have like Gatorade and Hot Pockets? You know what I mean? Like, the idea that because people are friends, they don't want to compete is just idiotic.
Crazy.
Now, listen, I get that Jordan and Kobe built a different perception, and I'm not even against it, but that's not the way it works for 99% of us in all fields.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Quick question. We'll have Gerard on 1 second, but David had a good question here. What's the feasibility of an NBA-owned platform or app for opening up content, clip editing, adding music, commentary, organizing game clips, creation to fans?
Oh, I think that's pretty interesting. So like an NBA version of TikTok, right? Where like everything is just in there and you can just create your own. I actually think that that's a brilliant idea. Go create that.
They actually,
like, literally,
they made it. This existed in like 2007. I'm blanking on who had it, but there was a way you could go make your own highlight reel. And then this was the world saying, oh no, we prefer, in my view, they preferred to have the exciting part be on cable and not on digital. And so they just shut it down. Who made that? I'm blanking on who it was, but Dave, that's a great question. Gerard, maybe you know this, Ben. Gerard asked a question on video every time. It's just a tradition we have. And now's that time. Like they play the music as the show's ending. Here it is.
Hey, Gerard.
It's like the Oscars. What are they coming on? No, I don't know what platform that is, to be honest, but it sounds cool. I'm wondering, though, for our purposes from media, and Ben, you're perfect to have on. If obviously the stadium experience is going to be different in consumption, how do you think the day-to-day media experience is going to be? I could totally see a world where there's no more locker room stuff. We get rid of all that. And I don't even know because Henry, we talk about all the time, game stories, nobody cares about that. But I don't even know what content from games look like beyond if we want to do true stories like what True Hoop's doing?
So I think that's an interesting question. I was just listening to Russillo with, I forget who was on the pod with him, but he was talking about how, yes, it was when he was on the JJ Redick pod, right? And he was talking about how, yes, too many people have access to the locker room. No, game stories don't matter that much. But it is through locker room access that you build relationships that let you get the big story.
The good stuff, yeah.
So I don't think we will see a time when that doesn't exist unless the stories themselves just don't get put out anymore. You know what I mean? Like, unless people just stop giving good stories. But I do think your question is a really interesting one. And I don't know what it looks like, because I think the other thing that we too often in this country do is start adapting for the future while forgetting that, by the way, like, we have longer lifespans than ever. Like, people, it's not like our audience is like dying off. It's just older, right? Like, and so I think you still need to cater to all those people. By the way, it's still like 20% of this country still gets a paper newspaper.
I do.
Right? Like, so, like, there's still huge amounts of people, boomers, Gen X, etc.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can just do away with them. We just need to add for the younger.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to still be here.
You mentioned something earlier about you know, the 360 degree deals like they do in music, and I just commented, like, the players are not going to be happy, especially the top end players, because they just got all that stuff renegotiated into the new CBA. But I wonder how much of it is they don't trust the people within the league to do it the right way, right? Like, for instance, 100%. the NBA. Listen, we all love the NBA and we'll watch it regardless because we're obsessed. But I have to say, like, the NBA app and League Pass is awful. Like, it is fucking terrible. Sorry, I didn't mean to curse, but it's worse. So it's worse. Bad. Yeah. And it's like, how do we get? Because they have one good thing that I like is like the condensed game version, but you can do so many better things with that I'm just like, why is this so terrible? So I wonder, like, can we get good people to work in the NBA to get that stuff going the right way?
I mean, I think that's honestly no. Go ahead, Henry. Go ahead.
And on top of that, let's say you're Blake Griffin playing for the Clippers 8 years ago, and every day is made creepy by your owner. Like, do you want him also involved in your social media presence? Like,
hell no.
Well, I think a lot of that is just as basic as, like, listen, a lot of companies try to bring their creative in-house, and the mistake they make is thinking that you can just hire anybody, right? And what I would say is, if the NBA wanted to do it well, you just hire Wyden Kennedy, who's Nike's pretty much partner creative agency.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you hire RGA, who's their partner digital agency, who builds things like Nike Plus. And you go, hey, you guys are already great. The players trust you to do it, right? Let's not pretend like we have the experts, or even if we brought them in, that we would have the gumption to let them do what they need to do. Let's just bring on the best people in the world at doing it. And when they start doing that, they can win with that stuff, and the players will trust it. But also, to Henry's point earlier, if all of a sudden, because viewer ratings go down and the TV money gets cut by 20 or 30%, everybody's money goes down. And when you make less money, even LeBron is slightly less of a star, right? And so maybe it won't impact LeBron today, but it'll impact Zion in 5 years. Mm-hmm. He won't be as much of a star if he doesn't have the exposure. So all of a sudden it has this trickle-down effect where if you start negotiating some of these, and I'm not saying you're giving up all your rights, but if you can get some of this stuff into a collective bargaining, you will get so much more money. I feel the same way about ESPN and their talent. Do you realize how much money both the talent and ESPN misses because they can't structure these deals for the talent social? Mm-hmm. Like, if I want to get Scott Van Pelt, if I'm doing a deal with ESPN and then I want to get Scott Van Pelt to tweet something out, for the most part, I need to call CAA or whoever and do a separate side deal. But then I don't know who's controlling the creative. It becomes this nightmare. Whereas if that deal was just put through, like, even people like Prim Saripapat, when she's at ESPN and her only 30,000 followers, they're all going to be able to make money for themselves and for the company.
Right.
Very interesting.
Ben, how old are you?
38.
Are you worried about your Twitter handle?
No, because 30ish was a mindset. It was exactly why we're all friends, because it's the reality that 30ish now is like this weird middle ground of like, I want to be young and interesting and whatever, but I still need to go to sleep at like 10 o'clock because I'm old.
9:30, man. Yeah. All
So
right.
I have a question for you real quick, right?
Yeah.
I actually think that right now is the time that the season should get shortened, right? And I think the reason is they're going to need something to do a spark when this comes back.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think the season, they need to do other things. So like my suggestion is this, and I want to hear your response. I think they shorten the season to like 60 games and play games roughly 2 days a week on predominantly national broadcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
On ABC, CBS, et cetera. They follow kind of the NFL model, and they shift the season to go from Christmas till like July, right? And compete against nothing and baseball. But 2 days a week, and you can build, or maybe even 3 days a week, but you can build your like week around Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, right? Or something like that. It addresses the rest issues. It addresses the audience behaviors. It makes everything more of a national big attention thing. The biggest sports in the world, football and soccer, exist on a consistent schedule so that you really can program around it. So that's roughly my big idea for what they need to do. The entertaining as hell tournament and some of that other stuff to me are secondary, but that is the big thing that I would do immediately coming out of this. So
Let me ask you,
I want to hear your thoughts.
Can I ask you a question in your role as, let me reintroduce you. Ben Aronson, Managing Partner, Group Director of Global Strategy at MediaCom, which means you can answer this question. If you were to only have it on one day of a week, hypothetically, which day would be the day?
I think you own Sundays. People just like being home and watching content on Sunday. HBO picked up the lead off football and was like, oh, we can win this. And then football came and said, oh, people like watching TV Sunday nights, etc. To me, it would be Sunday if that was the only day I could do it.
Yeah. So I think I'll sign up for your plan. It sounds great to me. I just wonder if it wouldn't be better if you went even further, right? I wonder if we just went even fewer games, get more people to feel like, so if Zion's only coming once a year to your building in Charlotte, when he comes, you have to go. You have to go see him, right? Whereas if he's coming a couple times, then, oh, well, we missed one, we'll get the other one. But I think maybe, I don't know, once a week, playing each 29 games, each game once would get everybody's attention. It also, I think there's tremendous value in inserting more randomness into the sport. So basically, 29 game season, the best teams won't win. And that's great, because that means that 30 teams have hope. Whereas when it's a 60 game season, it's going to be the Bucks and the Lakers.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is when you have the most marketable stars in the world, you don't want to limit Zion and LeBron from being on TV nationally only 30 times a year.
But they only are on 30 times a year.
Well, no, but I'm saying in this new refresh model,
right?
Like you could, in theory, shuffle scheduling if you were on twice a week or 3 times a week, so that almost every LeBron or Zion game is nationally televised. I do agree with you that it would then all of a sudden still skew to the same teams all the time, but most people are actually okay with it because the ratings don't go up when we have the surprise team in the finals, right? People don't like parity. They like expected results.
So I don't disagree, but the NCAA tournament is pretty darn exciting, right? And it's exciting because they can turn Creighton into a valuable broadcast entity because of randomness, right? I don't know anything about Creighton, but one day a year I'm like, oh my God, Creighton, right? We never get that value out of the Hornets, never, right?
But correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't looked into this. I don't think the NCAA tournament does great after the first weekend.
Oh, I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
like
ratings-wise.
I've actually looked at this, and when those upset teams like GW or Creighton or that school I forget a couple years ago, when they went super far, everyone likes that. But come Sweet 16, when Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, and North Carolina aren't in it, ratings tank incredibly. Wichita State, thank you, Randy. Yeah, like they tank when the big guns aren't in. We like underdog and Cinderella early, but we want Goliath late.
But when it comes to baby naming time,
Baby naming time. That's when we turn on our Frank Ocean. You know, we get to go. Oh no, sorry, my bad. That's baby making time. Baby making time.
Easy. Wait,
My bad.
Coach, who was that team that Ali Faroukmanesh played for? Do you remember that year? Ali Faroukmanesh. Do you remember him?
No, but I mean VCU had a big run. George Mason had a Final Four run.
Yeah. Northern Iowa. That's who
Northern Iowa, the big guy. Yeah.
Yes.
all right. How's Duke right now?
Yeah, it's pretty windy. Henry, you always say that you 5 times every 2 weeks you can have your maximum athletic performance. That seems to be a good number to shoot for. NBA schedule that tries to get teams to play 5 times over 2 weeks probably is optimal.
Yeah,
and
that's
we're not
the
going to
Mayo
get to
Clinic
30
guy.
games.
Mike Joyner of the Mayo Clinic told me that number. He's worked on a bunch of the 2-hour project with Nike. He's like super expert. So Ben hit the sweet spot with his 4 times in 2 weeks. Great. I'm in. I'll sign up. Let's just do it.
I want 5. But I don't want 9.
No, but hold on. You get 5 maximum efforts. So at 5 games a week, that's 0 hard practices.
That's how it should be. Yeah, okay. My fear is if we lower the number too much, coaches are crazy because in Europe the practices are monsters in Europe. But they're so happy to have EuroLeague and Euro Cup. Otherwise, they would kill themselves just at practice. At least they'd rather do it in a game. But yeah, 4 to 5 times a week. I like the idea of 70 games, but I think 60 is great. Yeah. I love starting Christmas Day. We've all probably agreed to that. It's and this is the time to do it. This is the time to do it. The pandemic gives the NBA license to at least try it.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
All right, I'll do my part.
I'm going to call Adam tonight.
Okay.
Wait, I thought I was talking to Adam Silver. Oh, no, that's Henry. It's just
same deal. Insectoid guy, same thing. All right, guys. Ben,
great.
Gerard, David, super fun. Duke, thank you for being here. We'll see you guys next week.
Later.
Take care.